Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. It's very difficult at this point to record videos that or just feels very low priority compared to the other things that I have going on. Right now the baby is kind of waking up, which happens pretty much every time as soon as I come home. So even if the baby's already asleep, the baby's going to wake up when I get home. So anyway, we'll see how this goes before I need to attend to something. Yeah, it's kind of hard because during the sleeping phase, I sort of have to choose between doing laundry, eating, or doing something on the computer. And right now there are higher priority computer items like related to the passport and other clerical things that make it a little bit difficult for me to get these videos in. But I'm going to answer a question from readers. No, I wouldn't really call it that. Question from viewers. I don't really know. But one question I got recently from somebody was asking more about my autism diagnosis and how I reacted to it and how my parents reacted to it, or why they were looking for it exactly. Let me look at the exact question. It was, do you have a video about how you or your parents discovered you are autistic? So that's what this is going to be about, because I prefer to make videos about things that people actually want to hear rather than just me talking, because it increases the likelihood that people will actually watch it. But anyway, I thought this was a good question because, yes, while I do talk a lot about autism on my channel, and somebody had actually sent me a really cool other person's channel where they make a lot of educational videos about autism. I thought that was really great. I'm not like an autism specialist by any means. I just have a diagnosis and speak to my experience. So, take some of this with a grain of salt, if you will. But the funny thing about explaining this whole thing, and if you dig back far enough in my videos, you will basically find this, so I'm just repeating something here, is that I was never really seeking an autism diagnosis. It's just out of everything that I've been diagnosed with, probably the thing that makes the most sense. Earlier today I was thinking about this video, and I was thinking about the importance to me of an autism diagnosis is people are often looking for a justification for their suffering. Sounds very dramatic, but what I mean is that, you for years kind of wonder, why do things not work for me? Why do I feel so socially, trying to think of the politically correct way of framing this, inept, there we go. And why have so many things related to social interactions been so challenging for me throughout basically my entire life, or for as long as I can remember? And so that's kind of, to me, where having the autism diagnosis helps, because then you're like, okay, well, that's why. And I'm not saying you should use it as a scapegoat for everything. It's just something that helps you understand. And no, I'm not go up to people and be like, hi, I'm Michaela Peters, I'm autistic. No, I do not do that. Okay. To be fair, I'm only going to talk about it or bring it up if I feel like there's a reason to. As a more recent example, I became friends with somebody who, and this was I don't know, a month or two ago. I think it was about 7 weeks ago, exactly, almost. It was we were talking about not getting along with certain people, and I'm like, well, I just figure if I don't get along very well with somebody, it just means that they're not as neurodivergent as I myself am. And she's like, oh yeah, and then she was referring to it as neurospicy, which I thought was kind of hilarious. And yeah, so then we just talked about being autistic, actually, and she's like, oh yeah, I got diagnosed also. And I was like, when and why? Because it's a good question, why get diagnosed, especially in your 20s as a female? And so anyway, that's what I'm going to talk about now. And actually, for both of us, me and this girl that I'm talking about, it was because we were trying to work full time, and it was very, very hard. That's where it came from. I always knew working full time was the bane of my existence. I figured that out pretty quickly when I was interning at NASA in 2017. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how I'm ever going to be a full-time worker. The answer to that has become I work remotely. So there are a lot of natural boundaries that are enforced from working remotely, and I don't have to deal with people as much. I just sort of do my work, and it's a lot more independent, and it's like school. It's like studies, which I was am still a perennial student. And school was always a lot easier, because it's independent, and because it's a lot more this is the thing you need to do, this is what you do. Whereas in a workplace, it gets to be more difficult because there's a people interaction part of figuring out what you need to do in order to be successful in the workplace. There's a lot more social politicking in a workplace that does not exist as much in an academia setting. So Yeah. And so same thing with this girl. She was kind of struggling in her full-time position and had like a little bit of a mental health breakdown. And so that was what led to her ultimately getting diagnosed with autism, taking some leave, and then going back to academia. So yeah, maybe academia is just a good place for autistic people. Probably, because you can do research on something you like and then you can just be autistic about it. I joke a lot about people having autistic special interests, but like with all seriousness, that is a thing. Okay, so why I just touched upon it, like, how did it happen? Why did it happen? So like going all the way back, I remember being young and being like, I have a really hard time socializing. Like I was always kind of able to find a small group of people to relate to, like, and then definitely as I started traveling a lot and learning languages, like I did quickly learn how to, connect with new people very easily. Now I don't feel like that was like the story my entire life, but I'm saying these are the things that have contributed to where I am today, and with my large YouTube following and having lots of friends all over the world, and like, how does this happen for an autistic person? And keeping in mind that there are different levels, right? And so something to keep in mind is like, if you're like level 1, like, yeah, you may feel some social disconnect and some challenges in general around, reading social cues, but like, you can more or less function, okay? Just because you may have difficulties holding down a job doesn't mean it's impossible. It means you just might need to be a bit more creative with what that's going to look like for you so that you can tolerate it long term. And I get the 9 to 5 thing is not good for everybody. And what would my advice be? Find a remote job. And the reality is I don't think most people like working remotely. It's definitely more of a like, introverted, autistic person, whatever. Like it fits a certain kind of person. So yeah, for as long as I can remember, just feeling socially inept, looking at people who were more autistic than me, like retrospectively, that's what it was, but more socially inept than me, and feeling like a deep sense of pity for them and not really understanding why, but it was basically because it was like the experience I was already having, but like intensified. Let me think some more. Okay, so yeah, like just this was the part I was going to say. So I remember all right, this is actually a very funny thing because I have a suspicion that both myself and the father of my child are autistic, but I remember thinking like I felt so upset about like how socially inept I was from such a young age that I didn't want my child to go through like a similar experience. So I was like kind of really wanted to like reproduce with somebody who was a lot more socially adept than me. The ironic part is that didn't probably happen, but whatever. So this is where like socialization comes in, and this is kind of why I believe daycare is important, and like putting your kid in different environments, like different communities where they're going to get, more interaction with people. Okay, so I remember being about 15 years old and being like, autism, am I autistic? And then going to my parents and then being like, no. So any sort of like me having an issue sort of thing was always gaslit with like, you're normal and just deal with it. However, there was a very traumatic moment, which my mother would not be proud of me bringing this up, where my mom started screaming at me in the car one day and telling me how weird I was. And I don't remember why this happened. It's just something that is like a little bit traumatic, so therefore I actually remember it. And yeah, like honestly, it's like low-key PTSD. But, if you kind of think about like weird, right? The word weird and what makes somebody weird, there tends to be an association with an autistic person being weird. Like this is just kind of, you don't, for people who don't like understand what autism is, you're like, something's like off about this person, or like what's wrong with this person, or like why are they weird? And then it's like they're just probably autistic, honestly. And I like the way my aunt put it, where she's like, being autistic in her mind is just a different flavor of personality. And I was like, that's a good way of looking at it. So anyway, so, I was gaslit at age 15, nothing's wrong with you. Okay, whatever. Learned to mask pretty well. A lot of people think masking is a problem. I'm not really sure how I feel about that, because masking to me is a necessary evil for you to be able to function in most of society in which you live. So is it a problem? Is it a bad thing to do? I don't feel like it is, but that's my opinion, okay? And I'm not a specialist. We're going to go back to that. This is just my own experience, okay? Now, I just kind of dropped it, didn't think about it again for a long time. I took psychology in high school, got some rudimentary psychology understanding from that, kind of forgot about psychology. It ceased to be my autistic interest for a while, got converted to Russian for years until I became, satisfactory, fluent with that. And then, it did return to psychology again, actually, once I started living here. And then it was like that for like 2 years. And then it turned into like personal finance and the housing market. Then I got some property. And then I'm like, I don't really know. I don't know what my autistic special interest is right now. Might be having a baby, honestly, and just like trying to figure that out. I think it is maybe psychology again, because I'm trying to figure out how to like not traumatize my kid. Yeah, that's what it is right now. So yes, there tends to be like an autistic special interest with people, but it's like, to quote this, it's like if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Like, again, it's like autism is just too nuanced to be able to like blanket statement everything, but certain things you may wonder, why do I do this? It's an autism thing. For me, I've never been able to understand sarcasm my entire life, and I still do not. And I actually strongly dislike interacting with people who use an excessive amount of sarcasm. I like stupid humor, like imitating voices for people and like pretending that I don't know, like it's hard for me to explain. I think also I grew up with a mom who used sarcasm like rather seriously to like be mean, so that's another reason why I kind of view it as like serious and not just like trying to be funny. However, by other accounts, people who are autistic, because they don't understand sarcasm naturally, will actually try to overcompensate and be overly sarcastic instead. So that is something that happens. Okay, yeah. So another thing that I found out recently, because the whole sensory experience thing, and I googled this also. If you're like very sensitive to tickling, which I recently learned that I don't like when people tickle me, and I will like start like scratching them and punching them and stuff. Yeah, that's also an autism thing. So I'm just saying there are like so many things that are like, why do I do this? And it's like, yeah, I've now learned it's linked to autism. And when I was younger, it was just like, I'm just weird. Like I just didn't think much of it. I was good enough at blending in society, but like there were always certain things, like working at the restaurant, like before I even got diagnosed with autism, one girl, well, her uncle like specializes in autism, so this makes more sense in this context. And she's like, "Yeah, you're autistic," and I'm like, "I am. How do you know?" And then she's like, "How do you not know?" And I'm like, because I don't know, because I grew up in a family where nobody even seemed to know what autism was. So how was I supposed to know what it was? It's the same thing where if you haven't been exposed to something, like why the heck would you know that? That's why a lot of times with my friends, when they know certain information that I think is like very weird, I'm like, "How do you know that?" And then sometimes they can cite it, sometimes they can't. So kind of depends. But anyway, again, I was not seeking an autism diagnosis because I had already closed the door of, am I autistic? No, the end, bye. Like that's how that went in my mind. So really what happened was I got through all my academia and I could no longer procrastinate from getting a full-time job through academia. So I ended up getting a full-time job and then having a tough inner critic, which is very difficult to get rid of, and being like, I'm bad at my job. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. How do I fix this? Oh, maybe I have severe ADHD and I need to go on meds so that I can focus at work so I won't get fired. So this, like literally that whole thought process is like how I got diagnosed with autism. Okay, how does that work? Well, as one does, when you're like, I need meds, you go to a psychiatrist. Now, I've talked about this already many times, and this is where we're going to branch off a little bit. I remain neither convinced nor unconvinced that I have a personality disorder. I'm going to be pretty honest about that. The reason why is because, I guess I could go get a third opinion, but the psychiatrist was like, yes, this is what's going on. Meds. And then when I went to go get the neuropsych eval, she's like, this is not what's going on. And then, retrospectively, this should have been my first clue that I was autistic. But again, you don't know what you don't know. I did spend approximately from once I got diagnosed with a personality disorder, July 2022 up until beyond September 2023, like pretty compulsively reading information online about personality disorders, cluster B, specifically NPD and BPD. Now, the thing about this is to spend that much time being obsessed with one very specific thing, that's very autistic. So again, like, why did this not resonate? Because that's just not what I thought was going on. So anyway, the psychiatrist, I go back and I'm like, so I'm working full time, that whole thought process. I'm worried I'm going to lose my job because I'm bad at focusing and I need meds. And it was also like, I kind of had some other people I talked to who had gotten diagnosed with ADHD, and then them being like, oh, you're totally ADHD. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like from like 3 different people. So I'm like, okay, I need to go on meds. Like I have to fix this problem, very like problem, fix it, like logical kind of thing. Now, the problem was I'm like too high functioning autism. Well, that too. Too high functioning ADHD, so they did not want to give me meds. So I went to 2 different psychiatrists. Finally, they're like, we're going to send you to go get a neuropsych eval to examine how bad your ADHD is to determine whether we're going to give you meds or not. So I was on a list for 8 months, finally went through the whole thing. It took like a month because you had to go back 3 different times. The neuropsych eval happened 2 weeks at it. I'm sorry. It happened 3 weeks in a row for 2 hours every day on a Saturday. And I remember I'd do it before I'd like go into the restaurant. And then we reviewed my results, a couple weeks later. I actually just got the bill for this and it was like $600 and I still need to pay it. I don't have the card I need to pay it with here, so that's a problem. Also, they sent me the bill literally a year later. So I got this done a year ago. And so, the only 2 things on there. So I go into this thing and I'm like, I understand the reason you get neuropsych evals is because you need to know what's going on. I said, I have no idea what's going on. I'm like, supposedly I have a personality disorder. I'm trying to figure out if I have ADHD that warrants medication. That's the real reason I'm here. I don't know what else could be going on. And then she's like, okay, well, anything else? Autism. I'm like, autism, panic disorder, OCD. I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going on. Just something is going on because I've had problems my whole life. And I'm kind of like, I have my own health insurance now and I'm going to like handle this myself. And at the end of all this, it was level 1 autism and severe ADHD. And then I'm like, so I don't have OCD. So I don't have a panic disorder. So I don't have a personality disorder. Well, why do I not have it? Because I know this, this, and this, and this, this, and this. And she explained it to me, like why I didn't. And I'm like, okay. So I accepted that, went back to the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist is like, I'm still not giving you meds for ADHD. And I was like, you know what? I was just like, you sent me to a specialist, sir. And then he was also like, and I don't think you have autism because I don't like the metric by which the test that she used to score that. And I was like, all right, I'm done with this psychiatrist. I'm so done. Like, I'm sick of fighting with this dude. Don't you get paid to give me meds that you're not giving me, so you're not the only prescriber ever. So yeah, I actually did end up going to a different prescriber for ADHD meds. The irony is I then got pregnant and then could not take them anyway. So therefore, I have never taken proper ADHD meds to know if they even help. So that's where I'm at now. But anyway, so the autism diagnosis was a byproduct of trying to get ADHD meds so that I could be a functional work person. Now, instead, I got lucky and my team just cooperates with me and knows that I'll do everything last minute and that they have to give me a deadline if they want me to get something done. That's how I've worked my entire life, and I continued working that way in the absence of medication. The end. Like, that was how that story ended. Obviously, I'm not working right now because I'm on maternity leave, woohoo, but obviously that's going to be a thing coming back soon. But also, I just started doing 500 other things as the ADHD one does. So I'm like, I'm kind of bored. I'm going to like make my schedule really busy so I can focus better, so I can like add this imaginary pressure to my life, and then that's how I'm going to function. And that's what I did. So I'm like, I'm going to join a PhD program. I'm going to work like 4 jobs. I did all that, and I kind of still do that. But right now, I'm focusing on the baby, and then when I get back to the US and I have family, that's going to change a bit, but still, yeah, the baby's the thing. Okay, so, then I present this, neuropsych eval to my dad, and he goes, I hope that you know that this does not impact how I think about you at all. And I was like, okay, so that's cool, but it also means I'm not getting cut any slack, so that's also annoying. So whatever. Moving on. I am sick of the high expectations being placed upon me, so like low-key why I occasionally run away to Finland, just the TBH part of this. And then with my mom, I'm not even sure I really even told my mom. maybe I did, and I don't really remember how she reacted, but she kind of thinks mental health is an excuse, so that's not really a discussion. However, when my mom did find out I went on medication, because I was pretty like desperate at this point, I'll be honest, you would have thought I like murdered her firstborn child. That's ironic because that's me. But anyway, you would have thought I murdered another human being because she was like so disappointed in me. And so that's the thing is like, the older generation or just maybe people who are not as educated about mental health, like these kinds of weird things seem like almost a betrayal in some sort of weird way. So yeah, so the whole thing is my parents never really thought like there was a problem, or I'm gonna be honest, like I think that because my brother is an albino and like that's a little bit more of an actual problem because that's a genetic disorder, there was probably more focus on him, so anything that was like wrong with me didn't really matter. And then I was like always pretty overachieving, and I looked really I look excellent on paper still at this point, right? It's like I worked for NASA and I won a Fulbright scholarship and now I own property. Woohoo. Like that's cool, but that doesn't really speak to like my inner world view and experience that goes on. And like, yeah, it's hard. And you kind of get to a point where you're like, this is how it is. And I don't really necessarily have to fix it. I just got to live with it and manage it. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it managing because, this is something I discussed with my brother who does remain convinced I have a personality disorder, which, that's fine. I don't care. I'm cool with that. Which is the ironic part because most people who have personality disorders, you can never really get them to admit it. But again, I'm convinced and unconvinced about it. So I live in two worlds with that. Oh, the thing I did want to talk about was there's this thing called, what is it? Diploma Duck or something on Instagram. And it explains autism and ADHD, like the AUDHD or whatever. And it was like at the end, it's like 2 ducks, 1 brain. And so it's like you're constantly both seeking stimulation and simultaneously stimming at the same time. I'm like, that's exactly it. Because even if I think about the concept of me liking to go back and forth between Finland and the US, it's like there are certain things that I like stimulation, seek, and stim from in each of those different environments. So I thought that was cool and was like a very good point. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess what is the whole point of this video? To explain the experience. Oh yes, but yeah, see, this is like very ADHD. It's like, where's the train of thought? It's not there. Or I keep going like this. It's always been like that. It's how it is. But with my brother, we'll kind of discuss these things about like, attributing like what of like how I behave is attributed to maybe like mental illness or my mental state versus like what is like real, especially my interactions with other people, which is good. He's like a AI version of DBT therapy, which I have also taken. That's dialectical behavioral therapy, and this is some of the stuff that they recommend for people with personality disorders. So anyway, what's the point here? Mental illness is real. Sometimes it's hard to understand what exactly is going on. I think at some point more recently, my dad said, I always like kind of knew there was something up with you, but like I just never knew what it was. At the same time, he never actually told me that until like recently. So, and this is a thing now that I have my own child. I don't really think that I'm going to try to label my child unless my child wants to be labeled. And even then, I'm not even sure I'm going to want to be the one to do it. If it's all like, Mommy, I have ADHD. Mommy, I'm autistic. I'll be like, you know what? This is when you see a specialist. And if it makes you feel better to go get diagnosed, then go ahead. But if it doesn't, then don't. Like, the whole point is just for you to approach your own brain with more understanding so that you can, I don't want to say feel good about yourself, but like that you can like manage yourself because, yes, so this is the point of what my brother was saying is like, personality disorders, they're not curable. Okay. They're manageable. They're not curable. It's like cancer that goes into remission. And sometimes you're doing fine and sometimes you're going to have flare-ups. So that's kind of the way that I approach it. And I try to understand, what are the things that cause flare-ups? For me, like, a bad relationship with a bad breakup. That's going to cause a flare-up. I think that would be hard for most people, but, that's an example. My parents getting divorced. I didn't have control over that. That was really bad. That's that's kind of it. For me, they are relationship dependent, which again could be an actual personality disorder thing, or could also be autism, because this is the issue too, is that autistic women will notoriously get misdiagnosed with having personality disorders. You can look this up. So anyway, what was the whole point of getting diagnosed with autism? There really wasn't one. That's what I'm trying to get at. It was sort of a byproduct of me trying to solve another problem, and in the meantime, finding another problem, if you will. Now, I don't know if that's the best way of defining it, but, now I just approach this with this form of understanding. And so, I'll be honest, what I secretly do, and I hate to admit this because it's not very appropriate or whatever, is like, I kind of try to secretly diagnose whether I think people are autistic and stuff, and then I like go for those people, like in terms of like trying to date them or like be in a relationship or like be in a friendship with them kind of thing. Like that's more interesting to me because there's an easier way of relating, I guess, with that. Yeah. So yeah, but and then also it goes back to what this friend was saying where she's like, if somebody's not neurospicy enough. And I'm like, yeah, I just like, even just on a friend level, it's like hard for me to relate to people. But then again, it's like, just because somebody like fits into that category doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to like them either. This is kind of like, I feel like people would get very into the Myers-Briggs stuff. I did have an autistic special interest in Myers-Briggs around age 17, and I was like, oh, I'm an INTJ, so that means I only get along with other INTJs. Okay, then the ironic part is then I switched Myers-Briggs types like 3 times, and now I'm like an ENTP or something, and then I think I turned into an ENTJ, and then I went back to an INTJ, like, I don't know, so whatever. So it's all very... Now we're going to get to the point where I explain it's all very nuanced and it's all very subjective. So, like, you can label yourself all you want, but, like, the world is not black and white. It's many shades of gray. So, again, if it helps you to put everything into a box, that's fine. Now, the one thing I'm going to warn against is having these discussions with people verbally. It tends to piss people off. People don't like labels. People feel very constricted by them, and they think it's like an excuse. They think it's a scapegoat. So, again, for you, internally it helps you justify your suffering or understand yourself better, then by all means seek a diagnosis. But if you're gonna get it and try to like use it to explain away all of the things that you do that are not socially acceptable, well, that's not really a good strategy in my opinion, but you do what you want. It's your life, not mine. So yeah, anyway, now I guess I try to be like an autistic spokesperson or something. One of the funny things was we were looking at my 23andMe the other day, me and my one friend, and she's like, you don't like public speaking, or you have a fear of public speaking? I'm like, yeah, I do. And she's like, how? You have a YouTube channel? I'm like, that's very different, because that's literally just me talking at myself in a screen and then people responding and me not knowing half of these people and not really caring. Whereas like, get me in front of a real crowd of people, yikes. No thanks. So yeah. But anyway, I hope all that's helpful and interesting. I mean, sometimes I feel like I make these long videos and like they're definitely not interesting, but if it's interesting to the one person who asked the question, then my mission here is done. All right, I'm going to try to keep recording, and I got to eat, and then I want to go for a walk, and I need to do laundry, so all these things. And then that's not all going to happen because I'm going to get interrupted by the milk leech, as my brother calls her. So yeah, but she's a pretty good baby, so like I say that and then she makes a noise. I mean, she's agreeing. No, I don't know. I don't even know. Actually, I think there's like voice suppression here, like noise suppression in the background, so I'm not even sure that you can hear it. But yeah, I'm lucky. I don't know what to say. Yeah, but it's beautiful outside. I gotta get outside for real. All right, well, thank you very much for coming to my TED Talk, and until next time, bye.